Welcome to the Ag Inspo Podcast, where we delve into the dynamic world of agriculture, uncovering the stories that inspire, empower, and drive change. Join hosts Rena Striegel and Rabou as they explore the journeys of farmers, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are making a difference as they navigate the critical work of transitioning their operation to the next generation. From navigating family dynamics to developing the next generation of ag leaders, we'll bring you the insights and inspiration you need to thrive in today's ever-evolving agricultural landscape. So whether you're a seasoned industry veteran or just starting out, get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we learn from best practices and a few colossal failures on the Ag Inspo Podcast.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ag Inspo Podcast. We are so excited to have you with us today, as we always are excited to have you with us. But today, our guest is Wally Thomas from Morsen Services in Minnesota. And I'm excited about this conversation today for a couple of different reasons. One, we have our upcoming Dirt Project workshop that's coming to Des Moines on December 2nd through the 4th. And not only is Ron going to share the stage with me as an instructor for that event, but Wally is also joining us as an instructor. So, I kind of feel like we're getting a little precursor to the Dirt Project on our podcast today. Wally is going to just introduce himself here real quick, but what we are going to talk about today is sort of a topic that's near and dear to everybody's heart, which is the acquisition of farmland. And how do we do it? How do we build that into our succession plan? And how do we remain competitive when we, feel that asset just continues to appreciate in value and gets harder and harder to kind of make it cash flow? So I think our conversation today is going to be exciting. I can't wait to dig into it. But before we do that, Wally, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about your history, as well as how you got and acquired the company that you own today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rena. Yeah, good morning, Ron. Yeah. So, hey, thanks for having me on here. But you mentioned Morsen Services. That's relatively new for me. I bought the company 3 years ago, and that was a really good career move for me, I think, after 26 years of banking and some education background that I had. But what Morsen Services is a small company. We specialize in secondary market ag real estate financing. So we aren't a bank, but we find the funds. So we have participating companies that provide the capital. What Morsen Services does is makes the recommendations on what the loan structure will look like, who these people are, that are our clients, and then our small staff also services the loan throughout the life of the loan. So where the company's at. We've got clients in southern Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Missouri. One client in Indiana. So we're somewhat spread out, but I like being spread out, because it gives us some diversity in our portfolio. But that portfolio today is about 160 million worth of ag loans, and it covers ground that's probably around about 69,000 acres. So with that, also, what I do is I do some consulting for multi-generational farms, multi-entity farms, and it's really kind of a natural fit for me, with being able to help some of these farms with their succession plans, transferring farmland, being able to put some of those skills and tasks together to really right size some of these operations, and similar to what you do, Rena, as far as providing some guidance and just being the overall quarterback, as part of their business team. I really enjoy that.
Awesome. That's awesome. So, I think everybody's like excited to talk about this, but let's just talk, just in general, you're helping farmers acquire land across a lot of the areas of the country where we've seen maybe some of the largest appreciated values over time. So, let's just talk just in general about what you see happening in, just land ownership and land rental, just from a high level. And then we can get granular and kind of get into some of the strategies that you're using to help, both established farmers and young farmers, build the kind of acres that it takes to create a sustainable farm.
Yeah, I mean the market, it continually changes and it's pretty dynamic. But most of the clients that I see that are really successful, they do have kind of a long range plan for what they're doing for land ownership. And typically though, 80% of these farms are being bought because it's that quarter that lies right next to their home farm, and they there's no way that they're going to be wanting to give it up. um, and typically what happens, and farmers might be renting that ground for 25, 30 years, and then all of a sudden their absentee landlords, might be that off generation or third party that's not involved in the communities, and they want to sell off that farm. And so after 40 years of renting it, guess what? They got to come up in market value. And that's very typical, on 80% of it. But what I'm seeing, is how that is successful is where the senior partner is going to be helping that young partner get established with it. And otherwise there's really no way that that next generation farmer, that young person, can acquire that real estate without some help from dad, or from grandpa, or from someone that is going to help them get started. I'll give an example. Young man up in Lackaparra County buying 80 acres, buying it from his uncle. His uncle is selling it to him slightly below market, but then dad is coming in to help collateralize it, with another 40 acres. But what's unique about that deal is his uncle had a loan on that land, and the loan has the ability to acquire that loan. And so that young man was able to assume that loan, and the interest rate on that loan is considerably less than what the market is today. So we were able to assume that loan, put another loan on top of it, with dad's help on security on it. So and here he is, a young guy. So how do you structure a loan with that? I mean, do you go long? I mean, if the guy's 30 some years old, I would recommend, hey, you go long on interest rates, because you know where you're going to be at with it. But at the same time, with that loan that he was able to assume, he's gonna pay that down real quick so that he can get dad released off of that 40 acres. So you just got to figure out, how you're gonna structure something, but then have a plan to make the payments, because most of the time those payments are considerably higher than cash rent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a circumstance like that, Wally, I'm assuming that the loan was assumable. The young man assumes that loan, and then he has to take out an additional loan to cover the rest of the value of that property, I'm assuming. So that's
Yep.
where you came in and helped him structure that.
Yep.
So with your services, where's help us to understand maybe the value that you bring to the table and the difference between what you do and what a young producer, for an example, might experience with a government loan or a farm credit style loan or a traditional bank loan.
Yeah. What we do is considerably different. I mean, we don't have any young farmer sponsorship loans, but those programs really have their place. Part of what I do too is figure out, okay, where is some of those sources of funding? But a lot of times what happens with those government loans and those loans specifically for young farmers, they take time, so you have to plan for that. If that young individual wants to work with FSA, or here in the state of Minnesota, we've got RFA through the state, and those are really good programs, but you do have to plan accordingly on those, and you gotta start a year ahead of time, to get some of those good programs in place. But also what happens is, those programs are designed for, up to, 90% financing on some of that. And in some areas, that's really not good.
Mhm.
I mean, because of the price of land on it, I mean, those programs do work well, where you can get those long-term payments, that are close, to what going market rent would be. But you really got to be careful when you're using those programs too. But where I come in is taking a look at financials, taking a look at markets, and then making some suggestions, probably that their community banker wouldn't be able to do, because I can go in and make some recommendations, and I don't have the regulatory stipulations to follow, or the lender liability type of things that are going on, so I can be a lot more candid.
Mm-hmm.
And be able to give some open suggestions that maybe other financial institutions can't do.
Can you bring or can you offer like say a higher LTV on those loans?
Yeah.
That and I know a lot of times your traditional loan, you might see an LTV of like 65% or 70%. Can you help bridge that gap a little bit? I mean, a lot of times with the values that we're seeing in farmland, that's still a lot of cash for a young producer to have to come up with up front.
Right. Yeah, you're right. So you're looking at, traditional commercial banks or somewhere, they're gonna cap that loan per acre, just because of their policies with it.
Mhm.
If the cash flow works and you've got other sources of income on it, I've done loans up to 75%. But that client has a plan. I mean, they've got a plan to chunk it down quick, or they have the ability to actually support that loan with some other sources.
Mhm.
But so yeah, where we go with this is, to kind of take that team approach and get everybody involved, with that land purchase. Yeah, I mean, and hey, if it makes some sense, with the FSA programs, I mean, they're good for a lot of young farmers, but a lot of the young farmers will run out of capacity to use those programs too.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's where I step in on some of that.
Yeah, they're a limited time frame. What are most of those 10 years for beginning farmers?
Yeah.
And then once they reach beyond that, then they're kind of kicked out of that system and onto the traditional commercial system, correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
So what about amortization on the products that you're doing and what you're able to offer? I know some of those FSA loans obviously have a very high AM. Traditional bank loans, you might have to, that's going to be a much, much shorter AM with an option to refinance. Farm credit's going to give you a little bit more than that. What are you traditionally seeing there, and what do you typically recommend would work for a young producer on how far to am a loan out?
Yeah. Right now the market is really weird. But I do a lot of 30-year amortizations. But when you look at what kind of loan products that are out there, whether you're going to do a 30-year, 25, 20, or 15-year AM, the interest rate's the same. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of amazing that wasn't the case, 8 years ago, where the longer you ammed it out, the higher the interest rate was going to be. Well, that market isn't like that right now, So, so 30-year amortizations are very typical, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wally.
And again, and that's and that's more typical for younger farmers too. But if you've got that established farmer that has that 80 that's coming up next to him, and he wants to know where he's going to be at with it. The sweet spot for some of those farmers in that mature category is probably 20 years on a fixed deal, and get it paid down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I read an article this morning with it was featuring Warren Buffett, and how back in 2012 he said, if I could buy hundreds of thousands of single family homes, I would do it if I could figure out a way to buy them and to manage them. And he was a huge proponent of 30-year mortgages for real estate. Do you feel that would be the same case with farmland? I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that there's no early prepayment penalty for these loans. That I'm making this presumption as well that he was encouraging people to do 30-year notes because it's less stressful, but in times, if you're disciplined, you can make an extra principal payment a year, or you can start to pay that down early. And is that kind of what you recommend and what you're seeing with some of the farm loans now?
Yeah. Yeah, and it all depends on the individual situation and what kind of risk he wants to take for interest rates too. But the 30-year amortization gives the most flexibility on what those payments are going to look like. But when we look at some of these loan products that might have some prepayment penalties on them, we can bargain more on the interest rate if we're going to have a period. Maybe it's a 3-year lockout. Maybe it's a 5-year lockout. It all depends on what kind of risk that operation wants to take as far as rates go. But a lot of times, these shorter term adjustable rates, when you look at them over the long haul, that they've probably costed those operations less interest over the long run than fixing rates. So it all depends on what you want to do with it. But what you also want to have is a loan that has some flexibility where if the market changes from when you originally put that loan on, that you can actually go into a different loan product,
Okay.
and adjust with the market, and not have to go through new underwriting or anything like that.
Right. So there would be an opportunity to essentially buy that interest rate down in the future as that rate, hypothetically, if it were to adjust down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because right now, that I've been I've been a student of the yield curve for the last 3 years, and
Mm-hmm.
the last 2 years, that yield curve has been very inverted, where you've had short-term rates higher than long-term rates. Well, that's starting to flatten out. But in order for that yield curve to get back to normal, short-term rates have to come down and long-term rates are going to have to come up.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all not going to fall at the same time. So, right now, I've got a lot of guys that are looking at 3-year adjustable products right now until we figure out where this yield curve is going to go. And then we can, within that 3-year time frame, we watch that market, and then we can convert it to a long-term loan or longer term interest if it makes some sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The one thing I'm hearing you talk about, Wally, is a lot of strategy, right? Like kind of going into the opportunity to buy with a plan, knowing how that land fits into the plan, and so that you can have these discussions about interest rate and what's best. And, because otherwise, I think if we're coming at it from an emotional standpoint, we just look at it from, give me the lowest rate, make my payments as low as possible so that I can cash flow it better. But I would love to talk to you because we've had some great conversations about, emotional land purchases and how much trouble people can get into when, they get really emotional about a decision, or they start to feel that pressure of there is no land available, so I have to buy whatever is out there at whatever price it's on the market for. So could you kind of just talk to me about how you coach clients through those decisions when maybe there's sort of an elevated sense of urgency around the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and it's a lot. It can be and has to be, number one, some research on really what's going on in the market. So one of the things that I really did learn very quickly once I started with Morsen Services is you figure out what the land is first, and figure out, how you're going to structure the deal first before you go through underwriting. But really what's important is that those people buying land really understand their financials and what their capacity is, to put on additional debt, or if they've the days of borrowing 100% to buy that 80 and collateralizing another 80 to buy another 80, it's probably not the best idea. I mean, it's typically done, but what you want to do is take a look at that piece of land that is up for sale, and maybe there's some other pieces of ground that you would give up or get your operation closer to home, or there's a trade-off on capacity for everybody's operation, right? So sometimes we've looked at it where maybe this guy's farming radius is 75 miles, and he's got some lower PI ground, that might not be as efficient to run, but you go ahead and, make a business decision, hey, is this 80 going to be going to add more efficiencies to my operation, and can I cash in that other one with a 1031 exchange or something else, so that you actually benefit your operation. But those that have a long-term strategy for land, and most farmers do. I mean, most farmers, that's their retirement on this, is buying real estate. But you have to have a somewhat of a war chest, and just like any other small business, you got to have some retained earnings in that operation if you're going to expand, and you can't always expand on 100% borrowed capital. I mean, you got to save some stuff in that operation for when that 80 comes up, or if you've got a growth strategy, make sure that growth strategy fits within the capacity of your people, and have that land. That land base is really going to be your foundation, and so it ends up that those that really understand their financials and treat it as a business decision rather than an emotional decision are the ones that are under that land forever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you like? How do you counsel families that are going through succession planning about when do you flip the switch between when dad and mom are buying the land and when they're transitioning the opportunity for land acquisition to next gens? Because that's a tough one sometimes to work out, because when you get to a certain stage in your career, you actually have more capacity to buy, but then you're also increasing a lot of wealth that then may impact your estate plan. Plus, then you've got that who's going to take on the debt, who is going to inherit, kind of that whole conversation. So how do you counsel families who are looking at this and saying, and are really questioning who should be acquiring?
I mean, that is another good question. But as you look at these operations, and you've got a lot of senior members in these operations that are 68 to 74 years old, and they've acquired, the majority of their wealth is in farmland. And then what happens is, if they haven't structured it right, they're carrying a bunch of debt on that land, at 68 to 74 years old, and they end up having to take so much income just to pay debt off that Uncle Sam gets a lot of that extra tax revenue from that, just because they have to have the income to pay the rent, or pay the loan. I mean, they got to have the rental income to pay the loan. So as you're looking at transitions and land acquisitions on it, part of what we have available today too is that 13.6 million on the gift side of it, where that senior member can actually help reduce his tax burden, by passing on some of that before it's too late, and be comfortable with having their legacy be part of passing this on ahead of time. But so there really isn't a clear answer, Rena, where when you're 65 years old, I'm going to quit buying land. No, that doesn't happen, but everybody, I mean, most farmers that are commercial farms that have an inspiration for expansion, that's the way they're expanding. But the land piece, in my dad's age and uncle's age and everything else, that land was the only way that they were acquiring wealth. But I think we have to evaluate that there's more there's more to acquiring wealth and succession planning than acquiring land. There's other things out there that should be part of that succession plan and part of that business plan, where it doesn't always have to be land. I mean, there's, especially now when we're getting into some lower commodity prices, and it's going to get tougher and tougher to cash flow $10,000 an acre land, right? But there might be some other expertise or some other enterprises where those junior members can get involved in to start building some war chests to acquire land like Dad did.
So I would like to dive into that a little bit further, because I think that is a super valid point. That I think it's really easy. We talk about this in Dirt a lot when we work with farmers, that separating the business mindset from the emotional one is probably just about the biggest challenge that we have. Like, all the business stuff, we can figure that stuff out, but it's this emotional component that exists. And as ag producers, we have this philosophy or mindset, what have you, that we want to acquire more land because that's what we're accustomed to. And then we become emotionally attached to that. And so detaching from that and saying, well, that there are other investment opportunities out there. When you have a young farmer that wants to come in and wants to integrate into that operation, how do we effectively have that conversation with the senior members and the younger members to come up with some sort of a business plan that kind of helps split the emotional side off and helps us to really look at the business side, so that the older generation can feel comfortable in retirement, or at least can feel comfortable in whatever payments they're receiving, maybe from a younger generation, a sale from something, whatever. And then having that younger generation come in and diversify that operation. Where would they diversify it? I know there's a lot of opportunities out there, but I know that my son, who's one of my sons, is very, very interested in being involved in the ag operation, who's 18 years old, also looks at the price of land and, quite frankly, the price of anything to get into. How in the world do we effectively have that conversation and start taking these farms in a direction that they need to be taken care of, that they need to head toward, so that we can ensure their future stability and existence?
Yeah, and that, every one of these operations is different, but part of what the art is do you have the right person coming back to the farm, and do they have the expertise to actually increase revenue for the farm when they come back? Because part of the big mistake that has happened especially after the 80s, and we've seen revenues on these farms just ramp up like crazy, and it was so easy to say, hey, son, come back. And when that first son comes back, then the other two want to come back, and all of a sudden the operation hasn't changed, and we're still looking at the same GDP on that operation, and now all of a sudden we got 3 more households. That is something, I think, where a lot of the succession planning strategies haven't really been thought out ahead of time, and that's the emotion side of it, where, hey, it's always worked in the past. You just come back, you work hard, and it's going to work. But you can't rely on that. So if you're going to be bringing people back to the farm and have a succession plan, that business plan has to incorporate how everybody's going to make a comfortable living, and you got to start there, I think, and actually ask the tough question, that, hey, how much value is son going to bring or daughter going to bring, and can I give something up as a senior person and have something different where I don't have to rely on the farm either,
Yeah.
And yeah, relying on farmland in retirement is awesome, but having the ability to have your next generation actually make a profit off of that is another thing. So in order to do that, you're going to have some other resources outside the farm. I mean, margins are small. I mean, they're not getting any bigger. So we're in a very margin management business, and so there is other alternatives out there where maybe the margins are a little better, but it's going to require some work, to get it done, because there isn't any magic wand that is going to, increase margins unless you actually find it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think that's a really good, yeah. I think it's a really good point to make, Wally, because I think, a lot of young farmers now are really not super interested in being pacified with the statement of you come and work hard and the sweat equity will build, and that is going to be your ticket to play the big game at some point in the future. And they're just not interested in that, right? They want to know that they can have a living wage that will allow them to support their families. They want to know what the plan for the management transition is going to be. They want to understand what the transition of ownership is going to be. Who will they be in ownership with, come the end of the day, so that they can prepare that ownership team for what that's going to look like. And I think you're correct. When the growth of these operations is funded, primarily with debt, and we still have a desire for cash flow to transition mom and dad, we got to have something that's free and clear so that a rental payment can be made that doesn't have to go to a debt payment. So I think you're right. Like, if we're not thinking long-term strategy and number of households and considering expectations and giving that plan enough years to play out, we really are limiting what we can do and limiting the, kind of just overall satisfaction that people have trying to work together as family members.
Right. And it does take time. I mean, it takes years. You don't have that that son or daughter, that, yeah, you forced them to get off the farm for 3 years. Now the 3 years is up and you haven't done anything. I mean, or son or daughter says, hey, I'm sick of corporate world and hey, take me back, that don't work. I mean, you better have some type of communication ahead of time, and part of the real problem too is where the senior partners like to hold things really close to the vest, they really don't like junior to understand everything, so they give them, bits and pieces of it, and it's like carrying, kind of a carrot out there a little bit, and they give them bits and pieces, and they don't share the whole story, so that son or daughter coming back, that next person can say, okay, here's what dad really has. Here's how I can help, rather than, being secretive, about where their finances are. And Rena, that just comes down to communication and trust. I mean, if you can't communicate to your next generation on what the real situation is, maybe you shouldn't have them come back. Or maybe it's not the right person in your succession plan.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like we could do a whole podcast on that topic alone, like, honestly, in terms of how do you prepare successors, make sure that you're giving appropriate information at the right time based upon time, talent, all of that good stuff. So yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that. One of the things that you were talking about just a second ago was, sort of that time horizon. And one thing that I have seen many times over the years is this desire, like, to wait and make no plans until someone knows what a kid is going to do. And so they pause and they wait, and they're hopeful, and they wait and they wait and they wait, and then they're not ready. And so, one of the things that we have started doing with farmers that are kind of in the wait and see mode is I call it ABC planning, to where we make a plan for what we want to have happen, right? Which is our kids will come home and farm with us. So we've got a plan ready for that. We've got a plan if they don't come home. So if by said time they haven't come home or shown interest, we execute plan B. And if we really just have a heart for next generation farmers and our children don't want to farm, can we identify another young farmer that's near us, or we bring someone in that we can groom to be the successor? And we kind of plan out 2, if not 3 different things, so that when we hit those certain time markers where, it's like, gosh, I'm 60, my kids still aren't home yet, I really need to start planning for what I'm in. We're not sitting there on our back foot with no plan in place, and then we're having to make really fast decisions that are not advantageous to anyone. So I think the cool thing about the whole world of succession planning is that it's gotten a lot more expansive. I think we've seen, enough of these larger operations go through trial and tribulation to get transitioned that we've learned a lot. And I think there's a lot of great strategies out there if those farm owners will give enough time to it to develop the strategies and enough time to execute them.
Right. And and that timeline, I mean, it can be anywhere from 5 years to 15 years. Depending on, where the guy is in his career, where he wants to be, yeah. And a lot of times, what scares the senior partners from putting a plan together, they're scared to retire. Well, most of these guys aren't retiring. They're gonna kind of do what I did and refire. They're gonna have a place on the board. They're gonna have a place to stay active in the farm. If they plan it out and they prepare their next generation to, do the day-to-day management. But the farmers, they're just scared to retire. They're scared. They don't have anything to do. Well, but if you can set it up right, that senior partner has got a lot of wisdom and can sit on that chairman of the board deal and still be have a capacity to have them feel wanted and feel successful. So
yeah, I hope that is one thing, Wally, that we stamp out of succession planning, is that if I plan, it means I become obsolete, I'm no longer needed, and I'm off, I'm out of the game.
Right.
And, one thing that I am seeing more and more is with that open dialogue about transition planning is that it really preserves the relationships and that desire to continue working together, so that as someone ages, they still get to do a lot of the things that they love, but they get to add things that they love even more. So I was on a farm yesterday, and I am not even kidding. This is like the coolest, happiest story. This is what makes my life just exciting. I've been working with this farm for a number of years, and grandpa had moved away because that was the way he could transition to his children, right? Like, I just have to get out of here and let them have it because I won't be able to be close to it. So he moved away for a number of years, and he's now back. And so when he moved back home, the son and his family that now are running the farm, we had a meeting. We were like, okay, we want to make sure this goes well. So what are we going to say to him? What role can he have? How is this going to work? What are the boundaries for this? And so everyone was really nervous to have him come home. He came home. He was so happy to be home. He's been a peach, right? He's just been delightful. Yesterday, he was out in the combine, so he's running the combine with his 10-year-old great grandson running the grain cart.
Nice.
So
Nice.
he is out there now training great grandchildren how to farm. And that tickled me to death. To hear them going back and forth on their radios and, and him coaching and kind of slowing that combine down to accommodate the skill level. And I'm like, this is what it's all about. This is what transition on the best days looks like. And it was super exciting.
Well, yeah, and he did it his way. He thought he had to get out of there for a while, and let the next generation kind of do it their way, because he probably knew that, it was going to be different, right? But once they get established and, and then bring him back, as someone that has a passion for helping the next generation. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool because, that family's had its bumps. Like it hasn't been smooth sailing all the way, but they're really intentional about what they're doing. They're really mindful about relationships and giving people places of value. And so it was really exciting to see, we've now got 4 generations on that farm working together.
Yeah.
And that just is a happy thing for anybody that's around agriculture to think about 4 generations being able to successfully work together.
Right. I know.
Wally, I think that goes back to your that whole story, Rena, really goes back to what you said just a little bit ago, Wally, which is about trust and communication.
Yes.
That what we don't understand, I think, in the transition or the succession process is that not having the conversation is still having the conversation. That produces unintentional consequences. But if we would just communicate and speak what we want, not everyone might agree all the time, but at least we can move the needle in a positive direction. But if we refuse to have those conversations, then it's going to have the exact opposite effect. We've seen it too many times. It tears families apart. It tears apart those relationships. It tears apart operations. And just that little bit of communication can move us in a positive direction. That I think that the senior partners in an operation, and I think those that have held on to those operations for long periods of time, I think those expectations that they have really need to change. That I think that it's okay for them to, I think it's necessary actually for them to understand the concept that things are going to be different. But that's the only way that those operations can survive. That you said earlier in our conversation that we're so deep rooted in traditionalism that we forget about the fact that change is necessary in order to move things to the next generation. So if we want to maintain the integrity of those operations and keep those together, change is absolutely necessary. That those operations might not look the same as they have in the past. But in order to keep those operations intact, that's necessary. That younger generation is going to change some things. We might not like it, but if we keep our why in front of us, I think, right? If we keep the why in front of us and say, well, okay, why do we want to have this conversation? Why do we want to involve the next generation? Why are we not willing to give up control? We have to identify what that why is. And I think most of us in production agriculture can agree that we want that farm to stay intact. We want that operation to be able to continue to survive in the future. And if we can understand that, then we can work a little bit backwards to figure out all the logistics to make that happen. And certainly communication is at the top of the list.
Yeah.
I just think that it's important for producers to understand that, gosh, just because you don't have a conversation doesn't mean that the issue doesn't exist. When you don't have a conversation, it is always going to produce results that you didn't ultimately want, that are adversely going to affect your why in the long run.
Correct.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And what helps, is if that farm operation can have consistent business meetings on a regular basis, and every business is going to be different, but you got to take the time to have the business meeting, put out the strategies, put your business plan in front of everybody every once in a while and say, hey, where are we at with this? But if it's too easy not to have the business meetings and then go to Thanksgiving dinner and everybody wants to talk business at the Thanksgiving table, and that's not the proper time to do it because
Right.
it brings out way too many emotions.
Yep.
Very,
Yeah.
very well said. Yes.
It does.
Or
Yeah.
you're
Couldn't
leaving
agree
key
more.
people out of the discussion because it's two people over in the corner while everyone else is chowing down on pie, which is where I would be. So,
Which what you're talking about is there has to be a degree of separation, because we live on our operations, and we forget sometimes that business needs to be business, family time needs to be family time. But we have a tendency to want to just commingle it all together, and family time becomes business, and then it just muddles the whole situation, and then it just creates a lot of discontentment.
Right. Right.
So Wally, I'd be really interested, as we're getting kind of close to wrapping up here, what your, kind of top tips for, farm families that are excited about growing their land base, but are worrying about how they're going to do it. What would your top tips be? What would your recommendations be to them?
Look at that land base and make sure it's productive up front, number one. And if you've got a plan where you want to expand those acres and keep expanding on it, where's that capital going to come from? I mean, you can't. You got to have some capital. You got to have a means to do this, so that you don't get your operation in a situation where you're not going to be efficient and you're not going to be profitable because you wanted to acquire land. And then don't get married to that land. I mean, I've got my most successful clients, it's business decisions, and they've bought and sold land over their careers because it was something that made some sense. They made some profit from it. So they're not getting married to their land. Yeah, they're not making any more of it, but there's always going to be a market for land. So and play within the constraints of what your operation is and who your team is. For being able to do that expansion. And evaluate every situation. I mean, it don't make sense right now, or if it don't make sense to buy $14,000 an acre land, what does make sense to keep the operation viable, and where would you go other than $14,000 land? Have that in place, so that you're actually making a viable decision on whether you're going to do this above market or not.
Yeah.
The other thing that I always, when my clients tell me they're going up and they're going to an auction and wondering if I'm behind them, one of the things that I always ask them, what's your price point? Where are you going to stop? And And
Know when to say no.
yeah, what's your price point? And when they have a price point in mind, takes the emotion out. And you're going to walk away saying, "Hey, I made the right decision because this is my price point, and I knew exactly where it's at."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's what I always tell people to know when you're going to put paddle down. Do not pass that point. So yeah, that's great advice. That's really good advice.
I don't know if that was 10 or 20.
No, it is it's one of the biggest assets you're going to buy. It's probably the asset you keep the longest. It's the asset that becomes leverage for other assets. It needs to be very strategic in nature. So I think that there are a lot of recommendations about how to do it and do it well. And I really appreciate, all the ties to the other aspects of your succession plan that you have to take into consideration, not just that that intensity around just purchasing at all costs. I think that's amazing. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to hearing, a full presentation from you on this topic at the Dirt Project in a few weeks. So December 2 through 4 in Des Moines. You're going to hear Wally. We're going to talk more about farmlands. We're going to talk about more about young farmers and how we get them engaged. Ron's going to be coming in and talking about, the things that he's uniquely gifted to talk about, which is succession planning from a farmer's point of view. And of course, I'll just be there to cheer everybody on, and maybe I'll say something smart. We'll see. But, if you are at all interested in coming to hang out with us and to, just really get into a very focused environment around succession planning and getting one either in place or getting yours fine-tuned based upon some of the things you heard today, I hope you'll come see us in Des Moines 2 through 4. You can register at thedirtproject.com. Dirt is spelled with 2 T's. So thedirtproject.com, 2 T's for dirt, and we hope to see you there. We've got just a few more weeks for registration and we've got space. So please come and join us. So as we wrap this up, we got to do trivia. We've got to do trivia. I told you it
was coming, Wally.
And I know that Wally, this was the only reason why you said you'd do it, because you wanted to go up against Ron in trivia. I know. So here we go. So, I'm kind of sticking with the hunting theme as we are, just getting into the season and everybody's excited about that. So today's trivia questions are about pheasants.
Wow.
So Ron, come on. I'm trying to tee these up for you, Ron. All right. So pheasants. And I found this to be really fascinating. I did not know that pheasants were as physically capable as what they are. So here we go. How fast can a pheasant fly?
Oh, wow.
Oh, like in miles per hour?
Miles per hour.
Fast enough that they're easy to miss with a shotgun. As I proved last week in Montana. And it depends on if they're, it's like any other bird, right? How motivated are they? And, did they just get jumped by a dog? And are they coasting? Are they flapping their wings? Are they with the wind?
It was really interesting. In the answers, it did give specifications for whether or not they were being chased or whether they were just being leisurely. So we're going for top speed. So being chased, we're looking for top flight speed.
20.
Okay.
I'm going to say 70 miles an hour.
70.
Wow.
Okay. The answer is 60 miles an hour. Those little stinkers can go. So 60 miles an hour, which is crazy. Now, just for fun, how fast can a pheasant that is being chased run?
I was wondering if you were going to ask that question next. Pheasants and turkeys, by the way, Wally, are I'm sure you've hunted them plenty, but
Yep.
wowzer, can they run fast?
Oh God, yeah.
What do you think? What is their run speed on flat ground?
40.
40?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to say probably 30 miles an hour. When they land, they can boogie.
Oh God.
Yeah.
The actual correct answer is 10. So
no.
10
It
miles
is
an hour
only
that
10.
they can run. Yep.
I'll be darned. Well, it looks
Still.
like they're running a lot faster than that when they land.
Their legs are only that long. That is pretty dang
It's-
fast on those little skinny sticks.
It is actually pretty amazing.
I guess
Okay.
they're not English, are they? But
They're an
All right.
incredible bird. It's
Yeah.
when we were hunting in Montana last week, the cattails, of course, are so thick you can't even walk through them. The dogs can't get through them, but the pheasants can run around in there, and then they can fly right up out of the middle of those. And while you're trying to maintain your
Untangle
composure
yourself.
and actually pull your weapon up without having a heart attack, then
Your
they're
balance.
incredibly resilient birds. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so I have one more question because I just thought this was super fascinating and I had no idea about this. How long can a pheasant live in captivity?
God, I got to think back. I had high school kids raise pheasants and release them. 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna say in captivity. Now, if you raise one in captivity and turn it to the wild, the lifespan is not long at all.
No.
But I'm gonna say that they will probably live 7 to 9 years.
Okay. A pheasant in captivity can live up to 18 years.
Whoa.
But you are
Wow.
correct, Ron. In the wild, their life expectancy is only 1 to 3.
I've heard the average in the wild that is 18 months.
Yeah.
Actually, so yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Rena, that's very timely. I'm impressed.
I know. I'm trying to stay up with the real seasons of the year, right? Like the hunting seasons instead of, the other seasons that we might talk about. So trying to keep it relevant.
I like it.
I do plan to go to Watertown with my son, and do some pheasant hunting. So yeah.
Nice.
A couple of weeks, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah, there's some beautiful land around Watertown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Nice and flat too.
Right.
It's amazing to me when you fly in or out of Watertown. I mean, it's obvious why they call it Watertown. It is just, of course I live in dry Wyoming, so, the mud puddle is a lot for us. But the amount of water that's up there is just incredible. I took my, I have some grain buyers up there, and one of them took my youngest son on an ice fishing trip. We went up this last winter, and, if one lake doesn't work, you just go 100 yards and you go to the next lake.
Yep.
So it's an amazing place, but good luck on the pheasant hunt. That'll be a blast.
It should be fun.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Wally, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person in a few weeks. And until next time, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next week on another exciting episode of Ag Inspo.
Thanks, Rena and Ron. Have a great day.
Take care.
You've been listening to the Ag Inspo Podcast with Ron Rabou and Rena Striegel. Find Ag Inspo on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. For more information about today's guest or the resources referenced today, please see the show notes listed below. Join us next time when we will meet another inspirational leader who has taken those small steps to bring about really big change.